Welcome to the Black Belt Husband Podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Hafner, licensed therapist, thought leading expert for men, and the creator of the Black Belt Husband system. This podcast exists for one reason: to train men to win in the one relationship that matters most, their marriage. If your relationship feels distant, if you're walking on eggshells, if nothing you've tried is working, you're not a failure, you just don't have the right blueprint. Inside this podcast, you'll learn the mindsets, tools, and frameworks to lead your home with strength, create peace in your marriage, and win back your wife's admiration and desire. Black Belt Husband is the step-by-step path to reclaim your power and transform your relationship. Let's get started. Okay, everybody, welcome to the podcast. And we have a doozy today. We are talking about expectations. I'm here with my good friend, Rick. And Rick and I were at the coffee shop the other day, and we started talking about expectations in relationship. And we said, dude, let's put a pin in this. We have to record this in a podcast because there's too much important information to not share it with the world. So what's up, Rick?
What's going on, Quentin? Good to see you. Good to hear from you again.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So where should we even start with this thing, Rick? Where should we go with expectations?
Well, expectations it's a mixed bag. It's a double-edged sword because if you do a good job with expectations, what I've found in my experience, it's smooth sailing, but so few of us get that right. I mean, I've been in the ditch so many times, mostly my own fault. And it's really rooted in our own selfishness, our own pride and ego. We want what we want when we want it. And so expectations is us assuming an outcome without the other person in the relationship really knowing what that expectation is many times.
Mm.
And so what I have found is, the number one killer for relationships. And for me, I'm a recruiter in my business life, but this affects both business and professional. So whether you're coaching someone, helping somebody change their career like I do on a daily basis, or coaching men, professionals like you, expectations is one of those areas where if you don't meet the expectations, the bar that sometimes none of us know is really there, it can really get you in the ditch. It can cause a lot of problems. It can be, I call it the number one enemy of good relationships. But man, if you get it right, it's the other side of the coin. It's the cool
Mm.
side of the pillow. It's like, wow, this is amazing when you get it right. But it's one of those things where you have to be intentional, Quentin. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, it's funny, I actually don't really think about expectations that much as like a conscious thought. And that's why I'm really intrigued to have this conversation with you. I I guess, you know, it's probably something I should think about more in asking myself that question. And I think this is one of the things that we had mentioned when we were together last time was, we all have expectations in relationships. And one of the questions is like, well, where do our expectations come from? Do we ever challenge ourselves and ask ourselves the question, are my expectations healthy? Are they reasonable? Are they grounded in something that's been tested? Or do I have just some expectations that are kind of built in from, childhood that I had in my family that I've never really, spent much time considering? And there's like really two sides of this conversation because some people have unreasonable expectations when they want too much, and some people don't expect enough. So it's kind of like saying, well, where's the sweet spot of, you know, because sometimes people will say, a lot of like new age kind of self-help people will say things like, you shouldn't have expectations. And it's the truth is that's kind of crazy.
I agree.
I expect that, my wife isn't going to punch me in the face. That's a good
It's a good
expectation, you know?
expectation.
So
Yes.
we should have expectations. It's healthy to have expectations, but like you said, we'll get into trouble when they're not grounded in something that's healthy or reasonable.
Yeah, well, you deal every day with high value men, high achievers, type A personalities. Same here. I'm placing mid to senior level executives in C-level positions. Our job is to set high standards, right? That's in our DNA. And I think as leaders, as men, we should set the bar, because if you don't have expectations, then any road leads to success, and that typically leads to failure, underperformance, mediocre performance. And I'm always looking to raise the bar, right? But when is raising the bar too much? And it's really, I say it's not raising the bar, it's raising the bar mentally without communicating that clearly. So if I've got a culture in my family, in my business, in my organization, my nonprofit, where I say we expect excellence, if we shoot for excellence and we miss it by just a little bit, we're probably pretty good. So setting a high bar is not a bad thing. It's when you have a high bar that no one clearly understands. So I think the
Mm.
clarity comes with good communication and letting other people know that, look, this is what I stand for, this is who I am, this is what I believe. If you want to go places and do great things, we're going to have expectations. You're going to need to show up on time, do your job, don't leave early, don't, we're not taking breaks every 10 minutes. But I think if you expect one thing, if I hire a person or you take a job and you expected it to be one way and it turns out completely different than what you expected, then what happens is, okay, maybe I had the wrong expectations. And that's a great, your question about where do we get those expectations? That's a great question because, like in marriages, okay, I was raised in a family where I was loved a certain way. So now I enter a relationship with my wife and I expect maybe her to love me the way my family loved me, but she came from a different family. Okay, so she has different expectations of what love is. Okay, if I don't clearly communicate, this is what love means to me, she may miss the mark and not even know it, right? And that's where the resentment and
She's
the
probably she's
unfulfillment.
she's gonna miss the mark, probably, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right. And then whose fault is it? Not that we want to fault find, but part of that is on me, right?
Hmm.
Because I didn't clearly communicate that. But you're right. It's like you're a father. Imagine if you tell your kids, "Hey, tonight we might have ice cream after supper." That's what I said. You know what they heard? We're having ice cream after supper. So if I don't give them ice cream after supper, they're going to be, you know what's going to happen. The end of that story plays itself out. So sometimes even when we think we're communicating, we're not really connecting, and that's the biggest fallacy in communication, that it even happens at all. What we
Mm.
think is good communication may not be.
Yeah, I have a couple like assistants that help me with stuff, some marketing stuff, administrative stuff. And it's taken me many years to realize how bad of a communicator I am with them.
I'm the
Um,
same way. I can't delegate to say I have to intentionally work on delegation because I suck at it.
yeah, and I have two people that help me now, and I've given both of them just carte blanche permission to challenge me, to chastise me, um, to really get me to slow down because I have a tendency to move really fast, like a lot of people. And I move really fast, and I wrongly believe that they just understand kind of what I'm trying to accomplish and where I'm trying to go. And so that's been a huge learning curve for me. And it's still something that I definitely struggle with, but it's this idea of like, it's that uncommunicated expectations. Like I have expectations of them and how they are going to help me. And if it's not communicated super clear, then there's definitely going to be a breakdown. So I guess what we're saying too, like thinking about it from even romantic relationships, it's not that, at some level, okay, our expectations might be really wonky and not rooted in something that's reasonable. Maybe I'll tell that story that we talked about the other day. So we'll come back to that in a second. But I think maybe for the most part, people have reasonable expectations, but the big breakdown is that they're just not communicated. I bet that is the big problem.
That 100%, 100%. And then there's that we talked about pride and ego. Valentine's Day is coming up on the calendar, and you know, guys don't like to be told what to do. So we're supposed to get the card, get the flowers, take them out to dinner, do the romantic things. The flip side of having expectations that are not met, which is dangerous, is what about when someone has low expectations or you set the bar low, you promise PM and you deliver AM. So when your wife or your partner doesn't expect you to do something nice, you do something nice. It wasn't expected. I grew up in Louisiana. There's a word called lanyap. Lanyap. It's really a Spanish word. It means a little unexpected present, like a little box, a little present, sort of like the concept of a baker's dozen. You bought a dozen
Mm-hmm.
donuts, the baker throws in a 13th or 14th. I didn't expect that. Thank you. Little
Mm-hmm.
extra bonus. That little unexpected bonus gives you a little bit of joy. It's like, wow, I expected one thing, I got even more, right? Or it's, the guy that says, his wife expected him to get her flowers for her birthday or the anniversary, and he goes, "Well, I thought about getting it, honey." And it's the thought that counts, right? No, it's not the thought that counts. But if you think about her before and you send her a little note or maybe a handwritten post-it note, and hey, thinking about you, can't wait till Friday when we're going out for dinner. All of a sudden she knows now, even when you're away from her, you're thinking about her, right?
Yeah.
That's the opposite of, well, it's the thought that counts, right? I thought about doing something nice. What about when you do something she didn't expect?
It's like
That's
the
when you
road to hell is paved with good
the
intentions.
good intentions. That is so true, man. I was going to get around to it eventually, right? I just never got that round to it.
Yeah. So everybody kind of listening to this probably falls on the continuum somewhere of maybe you expect too much and it's unreasonable, or you are on the other side of the continuum and you maybe don't expect enough. And so maybe it's a really, for everyone listening to this, just ask yourself that, am I the kind of person that's, maybe a little bit unreasonable with my expectations? Or am I the kind of person that, I probably let people off the hook a little bit too easy and I probably need to expect a little bit more. So assuming that nobody is perfect, and, we're all going to be on that continuum somewhere. Rick, what do you think is the big change that people need to make when they think about expectations? What's the number one solution to this dilemma of expectations, whether they're too much or too little, and how they get people in trouble?
Well, we've all heard that when you assume you're making an ass out of you and me, right? We've all heard that. Uh, One of the things about expectations, it's like a predetermined resentment. You've already got an outcome that you assume is supposed to happen in order for you to be happy, for you to be satisfied, for you to have peace, for you to have a good marriage, a good job, a good income. You have this assumption, and the sort of the underlying principle is that if I'm not happy, something on the external is not meeting with my expectations, right? My job, my income, my position, my promotion, my wife, my job, whatever the case, fill in the blank. But I would tell you that the solution, we talked about it a minute ago, was having clarity. Number one, having clarity about what you really want, what others expect of you, so you can meet those expectations or exceed them. So understanding and clarity is a big one. And I think you said it in the beginning. Most of us, we just suck at that communication piece for whatever reason. We think people can read our minds, and nobody can read our minds. And sometimes, if you ask someone, I do this in my uh, career development work. I'll ask somebody who's in a job they're not happy with, it's not meeting their expectations. Okay. Well, what would you like to do? What do you think would make you happy? And they can't give me a good answer. They don't know what they want. Just like in your book, Go Next Level. They got to start with, what do you want? And people don't understand what they really want. The second part, I think, would be to assume it's not them. I have this little pet phrase: when I'm upset, I tend to project on other people how I'm feeling. Like I see the world how I am, not how the world is, right? So that's part of the unmet expectations. I expect things to meet with my approval, and when they don't, I get upset. Well, why am I letting what's going on out there affect me internally? There's my internal world and my external world. So to me, the solution is to tell myself it's not them. It's probably something with me. What part did I play in this? Did I not communicate clearly? Did I not listen carefully? Did I assume communication took place? Like the kids heard, we're having ice cream after dinner tonight, right? Or supper tonight. And I said, we might have ice cream. We might go get it. Oh, but it's raining. The car doesn't have gas, whatever. I got busy with work. Wait, Dad, you said we're having ice cream. Now the family's in an uproar and mom's upset because Dad promised ice cream. You know what I mean? All of that could have been avoided if I said, look, guys, we don't have ice cream, so we're probably not getting ice cream tonight. But if you're good, maybe, I'll go get you some, right? So all of a sudden now they know there's a condition set on it, right? If you hit this certain level of achievement in a sales job, you're going to get a promotion. But if I just assume that if I do a good job, they're going to promote me or give me more pay, I'm going to probably be disappointed. And I had a part in that. So I think the clarity, the communication, and then always start with yourself. For me, it's easy to want to push blame on others, on things, places, situations, circumstances. That's what we have today, the victim mentality. And I think the other big phenomena is with the advent of social media and the internet and the information age, everybody on social media is putting their best, foot forward. They're showing you the good side. None of us see the struggles, the authenticity, the fear, the insecurities that people feel. And everybody feels it, but nobody's going to put it on their Facebook page. So we assume everybody else is doing great and I'm the only one that's struggling. That's never the case. That's the big
Mm,
lie, if there
yeah.
is one. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that makes people feel, a lot worse about themselves because everyone else is doing great and I'm not doing great. You're making me think about one of my friends a long time ago. He worked for this company called Blizzard, and they make video games. And it's a really big. I think they were famous for making the game Diablo. And one of the I don't know if it was a company wide thing or if it was just the mantra of the group that he was part of. The mantra was communicate early and communicate often, and that was kind of like their kind of ethos that they lived by. And man, there is like so much wisdom in that because when it comes to the the mishap of expectations in relationships, any like you said, professional relationships or personal relationships, it doesn't matter. I see this with my kids. Like you said, it shows up with my kids too. I think one of the big problems is that everybody is just moving so fast. And it takes time. We have to slow down enough to communicate what our expectations are and have a conversation about it and say, well, this is what I was kind of expecting out of X, Y, and Z, our financial life, our sexual life, our family life. This is what I was expecting. What were you expecting? Now, most people listening to this don't move that slow. They're moving so fast. They're moving at 1,000 miles an hour. They're moving like I was and still do, unfortunately, move with my assistants. They're just moving too quick. And then, they fall into the trap. And, then that's another kind of a podcast on how to get out of the trap. But I think the real thing about, solving the dilemma of misaligned expectations is you have to just slow down enough to have conversations. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that people do in therapy or in coaching is that the world just slows down, enough for 45 minutes. And we get to just have that conversation like, well, what are your expectations? It's like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that because we haven't slowed down enough to really consider the peril of having communications that aren't, or sorry, having expectations that aren't communicated.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example. When I'm old enough to know when voicemail first came out, and I used to work for the phone company, AT&T, and we sold it. And I remember um, our manager at the time said, "We have a policy. So you can be intentional about having systems in place to help you with this." He said, "Look, if someone leaves you a voicemail, you're going to put, first of all, in your greeting, 'Hi, this is Rick Clody with AT&T. You know, please leave a message after the tone, and I promise I'll respond to your message within 24 hours." That was our policy. We had to put that in our greeting, and then we had to live up to that. Now, sometimes people would call us and ask us questions, and Quentin, we didn't know the answer. We didn't have the information they requested, or we hadn't solved their problem. Our job, according to our policy, was call them back anyway. He said, check your messages in the morning, at lunch, and at the end of the day, call everyone back. And even the ones you don't have the answer to, say, got your message, working on it, don't have the answer yet, but as soon as we get it, I'll make sure to call you right back and give you the info you need. And what we did was we set the expectation you were going to get a call back in 24 hours, and then we did it. Okay, even if we didn't fix their problem, we began to build trust. They knew we stood by our word, right? So then now take the flip side. I had a customer who bought voicemail from us and said, "This thing doesn't work." "What do you mean?" "Well, I call people, I leave them a message, they don't call me back. It's not working." Okay, was that the system that wasn't working, or was that the person using the tool that wasn't working, right? So we think, oh, this job's not working, this marriage isn't working. Is it the marriage? Is it the job? Or is it you not working? So what we learned was as long as we worked the system, we had a policy and some systems in place to hold us in check, keep us accountable. It worked extremely well. And it not only did it not disappoint, it built, even when we called people back and didn't have the information they were asking us for, it began to build trust and forge that relationship. And they knew they could count on us, right? To be responsiveness. And that's one of the things I learned. Responsiveness was the number one indicator of good customer satisfaction. So sometimes just being responsive, right? What it does, it validated that I see you, I hear you, I'm working on it, don't have it fixed yet, but we're going to get to it. And when you tell people that, that's clear, that's communicating that we're working on it. People were good, they were fine. You think, well, if I can't call until I get the answer. No, call them even if you don't. And that taught me a lesson that sometimes just a response is improves communications. And then what it does, it again sets or calibrates the communication, and it brings about clarity, which again leaves no room for confusion.
Yeah,
Because
human,
if I don't call that person back, the assumption is what?
they don't
I
care.
don't care.
Yeah.
They're not important. Their concern doesn't matter to me. Well, of
Mm.
course it did. But if I didn't call them, their mind could quickly go. I say time is not our friend. And when we don't know the truth, we always imagine what? The worst.
Hmm. 1,000%. And that's how we're wired as humans to imagine the worst. It's kind of how we have evolved to protect ourselves. We don't think about the positive because, we would get eaten by a lion. So, when we're sitting around the campfire and we hear a rustle in the bushes, we
We're
think,
jumpy.
yeah, there's something really, big
That's the
and
croc
scary in there
brain.
instead
Yeah.
of
And you know
thinking it was
what,
a little squirrel.
Quentin, the other thing I heard within the last week that there's only two things that motivate us. It's either love or fear. So that's the other thing. When I start to get disturbed, or maybe I feel like my expectations aren't being met, what's really behind that? Because I love your question about where did that expectation come from in the first place. That's a great thought to meditate on. But the other thing is, what's motivating me? What do I really want from this interaction? And when I'm fearful, I assume the other person doesn't have my best interest at heart. They don't care about me. I'm not important. I don't matter. That's all fear based, man. When I was a kid, my dad left our family, right? So guess what? I assumed after that, if I don't know if I can trust anybody because they might love me today, but they might leave me tomorrow, right? So what's that? That's not love. That's fear. Um, but when I ask the question, if I love this person, how would I act if I loved them? Well, I would say, I don't understand. I would get more curious. I would ask more questions. I would listen more. I would be present and in the moment. I call it slowing down to the speed of life because you
Mm.
hit the nail on the head, man. We're all moving too fast and there's way too many distractions today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of guys are going to listen to this, and if you've listened to me for a little while, and this, I see men as having a disproportionate responsibility for the success of a relationship because men are they're going to be leading the relationship more, and so if you see yourself as a leader, if you see yourself as it's kind of like with great privilege comes great responsibility. And there's a responsibility for men leading their relationships well. And part of that leadership aspect is to set the expectation for the relationship and also be very curious about other people's expectations of you. It's kind of like, hey, this is what I'm expecting. This is how our relationship is going to thrive. Let's all make sure that we're rowing towards that same vision. And then also, just like any good leader, it's like, how could I be a good leader? What are your expectations of me? How could I serve you better? And creating an environment where people can be open and honest and talk about that stuff. It's safe enough to have those hard conversations. And then that's how we're going to get out of falling in that expectation trap.
Absolutely. I have a friend, Derek Young, great guy. He taught me this question, and I asked my wife this question the other day. I said, "Honey, what's one thing I could do that would improve the quality of our relationship?" And she's like, "Wow, that's a deep question." I said, "Well, you don't have to answer it right this minute, but I want you to think about it and get back to me." And she hasn't gotten back to me yet. But you know what? That's the same thing about like returning the phone call. The fact that I even asked the question, I think you did a podcast recently about radical ownership. I believe I listened to it. I think that's what we were talking about. What's my part? It's not them. How do I take radical ownership of this? And then when I have low expectations, I tend to have high satisfaction with life and high peace. When I have high expectations, it's like inversely correlated. I have low satisfaction. And so, what I've learned is not only to practice radical ownership, Quentin, but radical acceptance of however it comes out. Like, if I do my part and I love my wife and I am a good boss and I'm a good, a service provider to my clients, how it turns out is none of my business. And however it turns out, it's okay because I'm all about progress, not perfection. That's the thing about the social media influence today. We all are striving for this imaginary perfection in our marriage, in our job, in our income, in our possessions, our material life, our spiritual life, whatever it is, our health. You know what? None of that happens overnight, but none of it happens with work. And if we get disappointed and quit, that's the only way to fail. The way to win is just to keep at it, to when you fall down, get back up and do it again. And if I didn't do it well enough, how could I have improved? But none of us can do that alone, can we?
Well, yeah. So when I think when I think about a conversation about expectations, and I think most people think about it this way too, when we say, oh, maybe your expectations that you have in a relationship are not healthy. Let's just use that as a thought. Most people are assuming that we're talking about the expectations you have of somebody else. But there's a whole flip side of the conversation about what are the expectations you have of your own self.
That's deep.
What do you are you clear about the expectations that you have of your, it's like, don't worry about that other person. Ask yourself about the expectations that you have of you, and how well do you feel like you're holding up to the expectations that you have of yourself.
Well, and the next step, Quentin, is because you're probably like me, high value men, high achievers, leaders, people who most men are hard on themselves. We were, especially depending on what generation you grew up in, I'm harder on myself than anybody else in my life.
We hold
So
ourselves to a high standard.
that we do. And so the person I'm most disappointed within almost daily is myself. So the question is, how do I respond to that? And I don't always respond in a healthy way to that. Um, when I'm disappointed in myself, it typically comes out in how I treat other people and interact with other people. And really, I'm projecting is what I'm
Hmm.
doing. I didn't know that. I
Hmm.
didn't even know that word a few years ago, but now I get it. Like when I'm
Hmm.
not happy with me, I'm not a real nice guy to live with and be around. But when I'm okay, when I know I did my best, or maybe I didn't do my best today and I admit it and go, okay, tomorrow's a new day. I can get better. I can get back on the saddle and ride again. I fell off the horse today. I didn't do my best. I didn't give it 100%, but I'm committed to do it again tomorrow. That's that's hope. And if you don't have hope, a lot of bad things can happen. I've been in that place a time or two in my life, and it's not what does Andy Dufresne say? Hope is the best of things. Is a good thing, maybe the best of things. And
Hmm.
when you don't have hope, it makes you sick,
Yeah, that's
inside
what
and outside.
Proverbs say. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Yeah.
makes the heart sick.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's so fascinating that, very, very rarely do we really consider the expectations that we have for ourselves, but
That's another
we're,
whole podcast.
oh yeah, we're really focused on the expectations of other people. It's like it's so funny that in our humanness that our brains work that way, that our brains go to that instinctually. Instinctually we look outside of ourselves instead of looking inward and saying, I'll tell that funny story because I teased it, so I don't want to leave you guys hanging. So I was working with this couple. This is probably 10 years ago, and this couple were struggling in their relationship. And one of the expectations that the guy had in this relationship is that he expected his wife to give him a blowjob every day.
That
And
that's yeah, right.
yeah, so we had, lots of long conversations about whether or not that was a reasonable expectation, if this was negotiable or not. And I don't think I asked him this at the time, but I think I would ask him this today. I would want to know what are the expectations that he has of him,
Hmm.
and do those expectations that he has of himself feel commensurate with the expectations that he has of his wife? Like, are we holding ourselves to the same standard that we're holding other people to? It's like, I want you to give me a blowjob every day. It's like, well, okay. And then what are you doing for me every day? You
He was
know,
probably one of those old school guys that says, I bring home the bacon, I work, I own the business, I run the finances, so you got to do everything I want, right? Um,
there's definitely some
that's
of that. Yeah, there's definitely some of that. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
no, and so I think there's cultural differences in different countries and parts of the world. There's also differences in generations, you know, which gets back to where did your expectations come from? It's a lot of it is, the home of origin. What kind of family did you grow up in? Because, one of the things that I'm very cognizant of is that um, marriages don't come with instruction manuals. Kids don't come with instruction manuals. You know, if you join a company and they give you an employee handbook, nobody ever reads it. They have a mission statement, nobody can recite it. Um, but the culture is set. Even there's the written mission statement or culture, and then there's the real culture of which is I define culture as the way things work around here, and that's how it works every day. Sometimes that's healthy, sometimes that's not healthy, but yeah, is that a reasonable expectation? What a crazy thing. Well, the other thing, Quentin, and this is you know what you were talking about is that we think the things that we think. I'm aware of all of my thoughts. Some are subconscious, I'm not aware of. But, I heard somewhere where we have about 167,000 thoughts a day. 90% of them are the same every day. We're just like in a rut. We're in this routine. And so If we want to change, we got to change the way we think. But I'm aware of all the good, bad, and the ugly thoughts I have about myself. Most of them are negative, right? That self-talk is not always positive. Again, when we don't know, we assume the worst. But I don't know what you're thinking about me right now.
Mm.
I don't know my wife's thinking about me. I don't know what all my employees think about me. So that's where you have to guess if you don't know. Well, man, that's a dangerous game. You're playing,
Mhm.
you're driving blindfolded
We're never going
unless
to get it right.
you're never going to get it right. So that's why we talked about the clarity being so important and assume you don't know, so ask.
Hmm.
If I have ketchup on my nose and you
Hmm.
love me, you're going to say, "Hey, Rick, you got ketchup on your nose. Why? Because you don't want me to walk around embarrassing myself all day. If you didn't love me, you might let me walk around and make a fool of myself." Right. So that one of the things I used to tell my teams when I managed teams was I'd say, look, if I make a mistake, just here's the code word. Tell me, "Hey, Rick, you got ketchup on your face." And I go, "Okay, what did I do wrong?" That would like set me at ease, and I would put my defenses down and say, "Okay, I'm open for some coaching." Right?
Mm.
Tell me what ketchup on my nose meant. You're doing something and you don't realize it. It's a blind spot for you. And we all have those blind spots. But if somebody's not comfortable telling you about it, that means they don't trust you. You don't have that open, avenue for communication. And that's where the healthy relationships are when people feel safe to tell you what you may not want to hear. Because if they love you, they will tell you that. That's the difference between kindness and being nice.
Mm.
Nice is telling you what you want to hear. If I'm kind to you, I'm going to say, "Hey, Quentin, you got something hanging out of your nose, man. Don't go around with that. Get that out." Right?
Yeah.
Because I love you. That's being kind.
Yeah.
Nice would
Yeah.
be, I'm not going to say anything because it might embarrass him.
Yeah. There's another cliche that I like to say a lot is that clear is kind. And so
Yes.
it goes, very, very much aligned with this expectation idea about the more we can be clear about the expectation. It's the kindest thing in the world that we can do for other people, because if we're not clear about this stuff, then we're leaving it up for chance and we're definitely going to get it wrong. There's another layer in this conversation too, for a lot of guys listening that I'm just kind of aware of as we talk about it, is that in order to have conversations about expectations, like what are your expectations? Here are my expectations. How far apart are we? What do we need to do to kind of bridge the gap a little bit? Those conversations are naturally going to lead to healthy conflict. And if you are listening to this and you struggle with being more conflict averse, or you're conflict avoidant, or you have like people pleasing qualities about you, it's going to be very difficult for you to have healthy conversations about expectations, because they're going to feel kind of anxiety provoking. They're going to feel a little bit tense. If I say, "Hey, Rick, this is what I expect from you." And you're like, "Well, hey, Quentin, this is what I expect from you." And we're kind of, mixing it up a little bit and tussling through this conversation and trying to find, how we can bridge the gap about different expectations. That creates natural conflict. And a lot of guys struggle with conflict, so they're going to avoid those really important conversations. And then we can see the rest of the movie. Things are going to start to break down very fast.
Right.
We're going to get resentful, and it's just going to get wonky.
Well, one helpful solution that I've found is you've heard of is you've got some constructive feedback to give, a family member, a spouse, a coworker, an employee. Yeah, we all heard that sandwich technique. You tell them something good, you tell them where they need to improve, then you finish with something good. If you're talking about expectations and, instead of just coming right out with, "Hey, am I meeting expectations?" or "Here are my expectations of you," as soon as I start saying I have expectations of you, you're immediately going to think in that croc brain, "Oh my God, I'm not meeting his expectations." Right? We're immediately going to go to the negative. Is to start out with, we're doing a bunch of stuff right. The military has something called an after action report, an AAR. And they always start with what were we hoping to accomplish? What went well? They always start with what went well. What didn't go well? Where did we drop the ball? Where did we fall short, miss the mark? And then what are we going to do different next time? And man, I love that format because it's sort of disarming a bit. When you start with okay, what were we trying to do here? And did we get close? Like, did we have any progress at all? Well, yeah, of course we made some progress. You never have no progress unless you really bombed. And so if you start talking about that, then it's a little easier. You've like greased the skids to talk about, okay, certainly some things didn't go well. What? Let's be honest about that too. And if maybe you open with, you know what, I could have planned better. I could have had a better game plan. I could have had a better strategy. What do you guys think? And so I admit that maybe fell short as well. That can help it go more smoothly, because people have to feel safe to open up. So I found when if you're the leader of a family, a company, a business, a department, whatever, and you admit that you don't have all the answers. I love what you talk about. You talked about one of the things about a leader or father or husband is to say, look, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to learn. And when you say that, you just admit it. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. Um, so yes, I wanted to have all the answers. I would like to have all of them, but I don't. But I'm getting better every day. What's something I could do differently? Then they start giving you constructive feedback. Then it's a little easier for you to give them the feedback, right?
Yeah, we can do that with the expectations too, instead of, harping on other people for missing the mark on the expectations. We can approach the conversation something like, hey, what I realized is I have all these kind of crazy expectations and I don't know if they're really that good, or I don't know if I should have them. So I just wanted to share that with you so you can poke holes in it and you could tell me if my expectations are good, bad, ugly. And then there's something that's very disarming about that. Instead of saying, hey, these are my expectations, I'm going to assume they're all right. You better get in line. You better get with it. Or I'm going to challenge your expectations are wrong. It goes back to what we were saying earlier.
You know
We
what,
can,
Quentin? That's happening in the family. That's also happening in the workplace too. Um, the different generations have different expectations about what they get out of work and what they bring to work and how much work can impose on their personal life.
oh, there's a
And
big shift happening right now. Really kind of a post-COVID shift, especially about that.
oh my gosh. Yeah, the big pushback on going back to the office and can I work from home? Can I work remote? One of the things I've found is almost all of the leadership positions, if you don't offer some sort of hybrid or remote capability, you're kind of losing out on some of the best candidates. That's almost table stakes today.
Yeah. And that just you're kind of saying that because there are generational differences with those expectations. So, absolutely, which in the workplace is even, more important to have those open and honest conversations. But if we translate that to family, we're going to see that show up a lot with parents. My son, I have an 11-year-old, my oldest son is 11, and by the time he gets to 16, he's going to have different expectations of what life should look like when he's 16 than what life looked like when I'm 16. And if we don't sort that out with each other, there's going to be a big old power struggle. And so
Right.
I have to be able to challenge my own expectations. Like, are my expectations good? Yeah, this is how life happened for me when I was 16, but maybe life needs to happen differently for him when he's 16. And can I be open to challenging that? And am I asking those questions? Like, where did this come from in me? Am I sure? Am I totally positive my expectation is good and healthy? Or can I be open to, being wrong about that?
Well, and that gets into what's possible. We all have limiting beliefs, right? And most of those beliefs, some of it's environmental, some of it's taught to us, some of it, more is caught than is taught. So, like when I was growing up in my family of origin, I saw what a family looked like. That's what I assumed all families look like. We think everybody's just like us, and we grow up and realize no, no, they're not. So wait, was mine the right way or the wrong way? And that's where you have to kind of feel your way through life, and it's
There's no
challenging. But
playbook.
yeah, but to be open. The other pet phrase for me is, and this only came with maturity, Quentin, because I can tell you I was very much there's a life, and this is also something that happens when you're younger, and then you get a little more seasoned and mature. You think everything is black and white, and then you live a little bit, and you go, no, not everything's black and white. And then you have a little more experience and you go, okay, maybe what I thought was black and white was maybe perhaps there's a better way. But just being open to perhaps there's a better way, not only does it open up a whole new, world of possibilities, but now you're open to other people's ideas and opinions. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but just to be open that, you know what, other people have, different political and religious beliefs and cultural beliefs. I do believe there's right and wrong, there's moral and immoral. And I think there are some lines that are hard and fast. But the way we approach life, there's more than one way to skin the cat. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that. I think I shared with you the other day that, opposites in relationships tend to attract. And then after a while, they aggravate. So we love it at first. And then after you're around it for a while, it starts to bother you. And, you get aggravated and irritated. And why can't they do it the way I like it? And, blah, blah, blah. But if you stick around long enough, we learn to appreciate those differences. The trick is sticking around long enough to get to the appreciation phase.
Yeah.
And how many of us today give up before we see the miracle, or we give up, because I guarantee you those couples that have been married for decades, there's a lot of things that aggravate them about each other. I had one of my old pastors said, my wife and I, we thought we never thought about divorce. Murder, we thought about that a couple times, but never divorce, right? Like, that was the aggravation phase. I want to kill that guy. I want to kill that girl. But when you stick around long enough, today's world, we're in a throwaway fast service, drive up, instant grits, world, and nothing good happens instantly, does it?
You're letting all the listeners know that you're from the South when
That's
you say
right.
Instant grits world.
Instant grits.
People in California are like, what are grits?
You know how to spell grits? It's Gryuts, and it's 2 syllables. It's not pronounced grits. It's grits. If you want some, you go, I want some grits.
That's good.
Grits.
Rick's a good Cajun from Louisiana.
That's right. That's right.
All right, man. Well, listen, I'm going to land the plane here. What's the one thing that we want listeners to take away from this conversation about expectations? What's the big takeaway for you, Rick?
We all have them. Don't assume other people don't have them. Recognize that we have them. You have them. I have them. Quentin, you have them. And that whatever we think they are, we're probably wrong. And so we have to open that channel of communication, ask good questions, and then listen. Try to be as clear as we can about ours. And then I loved your point about challenge your expectations. Where did they come from, and are they reasonable? Because like I said, with the inverse relationship, the lower my expectations, the happier I am with my life and things around me. The more expectations I have, typically the less happy and satisfied I am. So if you can travel light and have lower expectations, still set the bar high, but go easy on yourself. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received from one of my mentors was, Rick, go easy on yourself. And he knew I was being hard on myself. And it was just making me miserable. I was a miserable human being when I was hard on myself. But you know what? We all make mistakes. Try your best and leave the rest to God.
I love it. Thanks so much, Rick. It's always such a joy to have conversations with you. You're a wealth of wisdom, so I appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Quentin. Great to be here. Great to be with you always.
Okay, bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Black Belt Husband podcast. If today's episode gave you a new insight or a challenge to raise your standard, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another man who's ready to lead stronger at home. Your marriage doesn't change by accident. It changes because you show up leading different. Keep going, and I'll see you inside the next episode.